Section 210.11(3) and Section 210.60 of the Electrical Code address different aspects of electrical circuits. To determine if 210.11(3) applies to 210.60, we need to carefully examine the scope and requirements of each section. Section 210.11(3) typically deals with branch circuits in dwelling units, specifically focusing on the requirements for general lighting and receptacle outlets. It outlines the minimum number of branch circuits required to serve the general lighting and receptacle loads in a dwelling unit. This ensures that there are sufficient circuits to prevent overloading and to provide adequate power for the intended use of the space. Section 210.60, on the other hand, addresses the specific requirements for guest rooms in hotels, motels, and similar occupancies. It outlines the rules for receptacle placement, lighting outlets, and other electrical installations within these guest rooms. The purpose of this section is to ensure the safety and convenience of guests by providing adequate electrical service in a standardized manner. The application of 210.11(3) to 210.60 depends on the specific interpretation and application of the electrical code. In general, 210.11(3) provides the minimum requirements for branch circuits in dwelling units, while 210.60 provides specific requirements for guest rooms. While there may be some overlap in the general principles, 210.60 is intended to supplement, not replace, the general requirements of 210.11(3). Therefore, to answer the question of whether 210.11(3) applies to 210.60, the answer is no. Let's break down why. Firstly, 210.11(3) is specifically for dwelling units, focusing on the calculated load requirements. This includes things like the number of small appliance circuits required for the kitchen and laundry areas, and the general lighting load calculation. It ensures that residential spaces have adequate electrical capacity for typical household appliances and lighting. Secondly, 210.60 deals with guest rooms in hotels, motels, and similar occupancies. The electrical needs in a guest room are different from those in a full dwelling unit. Guest rooms may have specific requirements related to convenience receptacles for charging devices, task lighting, and other amenities catering to travelers. Thirdly, the code often uses specific language to define the scope of each section. 210.11(3) clearly states its applicability to dwelling units. 210.60 addresses a different occupancy type, implying that it has its own specific requirements. Fourthly, the NEC, or National Electrical Code, aims to avoid redundancy. If 210.11(3) were intended to apply fully to 210.60, it would likely be explicitly stated, or 210.60 would reference 210.11(3). The absence of such a reference suggests that 210.60 stands alone with its particular mandates. Fifthly, the code is structured hierarchically. General requirements for branch circuits are covered in earlier sections, while more specific applications, such as guest rooms, have their own sections that modify or supplement the general rules. Sixthly, when applying the code, it is important to look for any amendments or modifications that might apply locally. Some jurisdictions might have specific requirements that alter the application of these sections. Seventhly, consider the types of loads typically found in guest rooms versus dwelling units. Guest rooms are less likely to have the same demand for small appliance circuits as a full kitchen in a dwelling unit. Eighthly, 210.60 may reference other sections of the code that are relevant to guest room wiring. These references should be followed carefully to ensure compliance. Ninthly, it's always best practice to consult with a qualified electrical inspector or engineer to confirm the proper interpretation of the code in specific situations. Tenthly, the NEC is updated regularly, so it is important to use the latest edition of the code and any applicable amendments when designing or installing electrical systems. In summary, Section 210.11(3) is tailored for dwelling units, whereas Section 210.60 addresses the unique needs of guest rooms. The absence of a direct reference or explicit statement indicating that 210.11(3) applies to 210.60 suggests that it does not. The code is structured in a way that provides specific requirements for different occupancy types, and guest rooms fall under their own specific set of rules. Therefore, you are correct in your assessment. To expand on this, let's delve deeper into the individual sections and their implications for electrical installations. We'll start by dissecting section 210.11.3, focusing on its intent and specific requirements. Then we will examine 210.6d in the same level of detail. We will then look at other relevant code sections to give more context on this subject. Section 210.11.3, titled Dwelling Unit Branch Circuits, is a cornerstone of residential electrical design. Its primary goal is to ensure that dwelling units have adequate electrical capacity to safely and effectively power the various loads within the home. This section mandates the installation of specific branch circuits to serve different types of loads, ensuring that no single circuit is overloaded. The first key aspect of 210.11.3 is the requirement for small appliance branch circuits. This section typically requires a minimum of 220 amp circuits for the kitchen and dining areas to serve countertop receptacles. These circuits are dedicated to powering small appliances such as toasters, coffee makers, blenders, and other kitchen gadgets that draw significant power. The reason for dedicating these circuits is to prevent overloading and tripping, which can occur if multiple high-demand appliances are connected to a single circuit. The second critical component of 210.11.3 is the laundry branch circuit. This section mandates at least 120 amp branch circuit specifically for the laundry area. This circuit is intended to power the washing machine and any other laundry-related equipment. Like the small appliance circuits, the laundry circuit is dedicated to prevent overloading due to the high power demands of washing machines. The third element of 210.11.3 is the bathroom branch circuit. This section requires at least 120 amp branch circuit to serve the bathroom receptacle outlets. This circuit must serve only the bathroom and cannot supply any other outlets outside of the bathroom. The purpose of this requirement is to enhance safety in the bathroom environment where there is a higher risk of electrical shock due to the presence of water. The fourth requirement outlined in 210.11.3 pertains to general lighting and receptacle outlets. This section specifies that branch circuits must be provided to supply the general lighting and receptacle outlets throughout the dwelling unit. The number of these circuits is determined by the calculated load, which is based on the square footage of the dwelling unit. The code provides specific calculations for determining the minimum lighting load per square foot. This ensures that there are sufficient circuits to power the lighting and general use receptacles throughout the home. Finally, 210.11.3 includes provisions for branch circuits serving specific appliances, such as refrigerators, dishwashers, and HVAC equipment. These appliances often require dedicated circuits due to their high power demands. The code specifies the minimum ampacity and other requirements for these circuits. Now, let's turn our attention to section 210.60. which focuses on the electrical requirements for guest rooms in hotels, motels, and similar occupancies. This section aims to provide a standardized approach to electrical installations in guest rooms, ensuring the safety and convenience of guests. The first key aspect of 210.60 is the requirement for receptacle outlets. This section specifies the minimum number and placement of receptacle outlets in guest rooms. The goal is to ensure that guests have convenient access to power for charging their electronic devices, powering personal appliances, and other needs. The code typically requires that receptacle outlets be located within a certain distance of beds and other seating areas, as well as near desks or tables. The second critical element of 210.60 is the requirement for lighting outlets. This section outlines the rules for lighting outlets in guest rooms, including the placement of luminaires and the control of lighting. The code typically requires that each guest room have at least one lighting outlet controlled by a wall switch at the entrance to the room. Additional lighting outlets may be required for specific areas, such as desks or reading areas. The third provision of 210.60 addresses the use of ground fault circuit interrupter, or GFCI, protection. This section requires GFCI protection for receptacle outlets located in bathrooms and other wet areas within the guest room. GFCI protection is intended to protect guests from electrical shock hazards in these areas. The fourth requirement outlined in 210.60 pertains to the use of arc fault circuit interrupter, or FSI protection. This section requires FSI protection for branch circuits supplying receptacle outlets and lighting outlets in guest rooms. FSI protection is intended to protect against electrical fires caused by arcing faults in wiring. Finally, 210.60 may include specific requirements for other electrical installations in guest rooms, such as smoke detectors, fire alarm systems, and emergency lighting. These requirements are intended to enhance the safety of guests in the event of a fire or other emergency. Now, to further support the conclusion that 210.11.3 does not apply to 210.60, let's consider other relevant sections of the electrical code. One such section is 210.12, which deals with arc fault circuit interrupter protection. This section specifies the requirements for FSI protection in dwelling units and other occupancies. While 210.12 does apply to guest rooms, it does so independently of 210.11.3. Another relevant section is 210.8, which addresses ground fault circuit interrupter protection. This section specifies the requirements for GFCI protection in dwelling units and other occupancies. Like 210.12, 210.8 applies to guest rooms independently of 210.11.3. In addition, it's important to consider the occupancy classification of the building in which the guest rooms are located. The occupancy classification determines the applicable electrical code requirements. Hotels and motels are typically classified as commercial occupancies, which have different electrical requirements than dwelling units. The NEC provides separate sections for commercial occupancies, which often include more stringent requirements than those for dwelling units. Ultimately, the application of the electrical code is based on the specific circumstances of the installation and the interpretation of the local electrical inspector. It's always best to consult with a qualified electrical professional to ensure compliance with the code. In conclusion, while both sections 210.11.3 and 210.60 address electrical requirements, they are intended for different types of occupancies. Section 210.11.3 focuses on dwelling units, while Section 210.60 focuses on guest rooms. The absence of a direct reference or explicit statement indicating that 210.11.3 applies to 210.60 suggests that it does not. Instead, guest rooms have their own specific set of rules that are tailored to their unique needs. So, in summation, the answer is no.